Last week, my husband and I went to see the Joker movie. We have, in the 9 years we've been together, never gone out to see a movie before. It's not that we were avoiding it, it was just more comfortable to stay inside, like stay at home and, cook up some fun snacks and just kind of hang out on the couch. And we'd look at videos and like movies that were coming out and it'd be like, well, there's this one, but I don't really want to see it. There's that one, I don't want to see that one either. Um, Joker, we heard a lot of fuss about, and I wanted to see it before all the spoilers kind of hit me because the spoilers were coming. So, um, we went out, we watched the movie, and that was an experience. I've never actually gone out and watched a movie with him before, so that was cool. Um, it was a good thing to do around our anniversary, so the timing was good too. I know that most of the hype has kind of gone down, probably died down at this point. Like, I'm pretty sure everybody's kind of stopped talking about it and moved on to other things. I should have made a video about it last week. I thought about it quite a lot, and it was like, I don't know if I even want to make this video in the first place. I don't know if I'm actually going to post this video. I want to make it, look at it, see if I like it, and then we'll see where we go from there. It was a really uncomfortable movie. It was a beautiful movie. Definitely go watch it. It's definitely a good movie. It's definitely well put together. It's very, very artfully crafted. It was very good in that sense. I've loved watching all the reviews because once I watched the movie, then I could see all the reviews and things. And I loved in the reviews all the different takes that people had on the movie. And something you can watch and then think about afterwards. And I don't know for certain if it's something you can watch and then rewatch later for details. But from the sounds of it and from some of the film reviews, it is one of those movies you can watch again and again and see new things in it. And those are always the fun ones because then you can see a fresh movie kind of every time, or at least multiple times. It was still really uncomfortable, and I think it was uncomfortable for a lot of people. A lot of people have described it being an uncomfortable or even a painful movie to watch. It was definitely an uncomfortable and borderline painful movie for me to watch, and so I kind of wanted to talk about my reaction to it, and why I had that reaction to it. Because afterwards, I was sitting around thinking, well, why did this bother me so much? Like, why was I bothered by this movie? And so I thought I would tell you guys about that. I guess I'll just say spoilers. Spoilers for safety. There's going to be spoilers. I'm not going to try, but I'm going to try to avoid them. I'm going to try to keep them at a minimum. But if you haven't seen the movie, go see the movie. It's a good movie, But I mean, it talks about, the film deals with mental illness. And mental illness is very much at the forefront of the film. Namely the mental illness of our protagonist, although what is the term for a dark protagonist? Anyway, he's a very broken individual. He's very he's got this uncontrollable laughter. I try to pronounce the word pseudobulbar, but I probably mispronounce it, so we'll just say uncontrollable laughter. And just very, very, he's hunched over. His posture is very bad. He's a very broken person. And I mean, one of the things that my husband mentioned after we watched the movie, we went out and we ate some pizza and we were talking about it, and he mentioned that it was really interesting that he never talked to people. Like, people would interact with him, and all his interactions were things that other people started up. Very rarely did he actually initiate a conversation. And that was one of the things that kept him from being an annoying character or a painfully cringy or awkward character. The film did a really good job with making him relatable, while at the same time also, emphasizing the almost crippling degree. Well, I wouldn't say almost, the crippling degree to which he was struggling. Which I think is honestly one of the biggest pieces of the artistry of this film. One of the things that makes it so beautiful is that it did capture mental illness well. There are so many movies that try to do that. There's so many TV shows that try to do that, and they fail. They don't succeed. I think I really honestly think, and please somebody correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it really feels to me that our society has gotten into this trend over the last decade or so of glamorizing mental illness. And I don't know what the hell we're thinking, but that's what we seem to do, you know? If you're writing a character and you want to give your character some depth, have them struggle with anxiety or depression. Depression's a real good one, you know? Have your character struggling with depression. And it's like, it adds depth to the character. And it's like, well, yeah, if you're trying to write a character and add depth to them, whatever. But mental illness, like, generally speaking, it's just ugly. And I'm sure there are people who are going to get offended when I say that. You know, saying that, oh, mental illness is ugly. All sorts of people are going to be like, well, I'm mentally ill and I'm not ugly. It's like, no, you're not. Mental illness itself is ugly. Disease is ugly. Um, Human aesthetics, our sense of what is beautiful tends to show us instinctively what is healthy and what is going to be beneficial to us. You know, ripe fruit is beautiful because we need to eat it. Good food is beautiful because we're hungry, you know. Somebody who's reproductively healthy and at the peak of their reproductive health, they're going to look beautiful to us. And for some reason, especially in our society, really seems that we've kind of disconnected from this. It's like, oh, well, you know, that's just what we're told is beautiful. It's like, no, this is something that anybody can pick up on. Anybody is going to notice this. It's something that we're very much designed evolutionarily to pick up on. We recognize beauty. We recognize things that are going to be healthy for us. You know, in so many different ways. I remember like seeing this National Geographic documentary, and they were showing people stick figures that were dancing and asking them which ones were the better dancer. And the ones that people generally chose as the best dancer had lots of spine motion in their dance. And the reason is because when a person is dancing, they're making a display to other people. And parts of that display, I mean, it's a form of communication. And parts of that display are health. And when you're dancing and showing lots of motion of the hips and the spine, you're demonstrating that your back is healthy, which is huge. The back affects everything. I have somebody in my life who's injured their back. Actually, I have multiple people in my life who've injured their backs. And it affects everything. It affects your movement. It affects how well you walk. It affects your posture. It affects whether or not you can lift things. Back health is incredibly important, and it's an incredible indicator of overall health. And so when a person dances and they can shimmy their hips around just a little bit, male, female, it actually doesn't matter. They're indicating that they have good overall physical health. And suddenly it's beautiful. Like, that's dancing. That's one little thing. There are so many things that we see in our everyday lives that we identify as either beautiful or not beautiful, that, you know, we're picking up on things that we're not necessarily even aware of. And the reverse is true as well. When we see something that's ugly, typically it's something that's not healthy. And illness of any kind, disease of any kind, is generally going to look quite unhealthy. I'm sure there are exceptions to that rule, but generally speaking, if you look at someone who's covered in oozing pustules, it's not going to look pretty. It's going to look very unhealthy. It's going to look unnerving. You're going to want to look away from it. Mental illness is going to be ugly, and you're going to want to look away from it. And don't get angry at me until I've talked about that a little bit and talked about my own personal experiences with that, because I have personal experience with that. It's not pretty. Genuine, actual mental illness is not pretty, and you will want to look away from it. And one of the beautiful things about this film is that they managed to capture that. They managed to capture the painfulness of it. the awkwardness of it without making it comical, without making it glamorized, without making it so uncomfortable that you actually can't look. They managed to get that perfect balance where you can see the character and you can actually relate to the character and even hope for the character. But they captured the painfulness of it, and they captured that almost wanting to turn away. And they did a beautiful job of that, because that's an extremely delicate balance to get. I never actually thought anybody would get it that well or that clearly. Because usually when you see any kind of mental illness in Hollywood, it's like, oh, you either have a very attractive protagonist who's like struggling with a little bit of anxiety or even more than a little bit of anxiety, but they've got so many other good and wonderful traits that it's like, oh, well, they have this one flaw, and it kind of rounds them out as a character or something. That's the idea, I guess. This was a character who was struggling with many issues, many deep issues, and still managed to be relatable, just enough that we could watch the film and actually see a little bit of how horrible it is to be really mentally ill. One of the jokes in the movie that I thought was, well, I mean, it was a joke in his notebook, so it wasn't particularly funny necessarily, but he wrote, one of the hardest things about being mentally ill is that everyone expects you to act normal. And it was beautiful. It was spot on. It was very true to life. Which brings us kind of back to why I felt so uncomfortable watching the film. It brought me back to my earlier life. It brought me right back to my teenage years and the first couple years of my 20s. Like it slapped me in the face, like just brought me right back to those memories. Not necessarily in the sense of the movie, like I was never quite that bad. I was never on massive antipsychotic medications. I never had a condition where, I was having uncontrollable laughter or anything like that. I never had an appointed therapist to try and help me cope with my problems. I didn't actually really have a therapist at all. I didn't have help. I was extremely broken. I don't know how extreme, it depends what is extreme. I was very broken though. I was very broken. I was to the point where people did that thing. I saw it firsthand, where people would just turn away, and I knew it was because I made people uncomfortable. I knew it was because people didn't feel comfortable around me. They didn't like me. I don't think anybody could have necessarily put a finger on why they didn't like me. Maybe they like me. They probably could have named something superficial, but I don't think anyone really thought about it too much. They tried not to think about me. They tried not to be around me. They tried not to look directly at me. And so when I watched the movie and I saw this, and I saw him going through this, this character who eventually becomes the Joker in the movie, but this person, it really brought me back to my life back before I pulled myself together, and got my life under control. It was a very vivid reminder of that time in my life. Was I ever that bad off? No. And do people end up much worse off than I was? Yes. There are people out there who are far worse off than I was. I was still in bad enough shape that a statement like the one in his joke book, the hardest part about being mentally ill is that everybody expects you to act normal. It completely resonated with me. It made perfect sense to me because I've been there. Normal is, when I was growing up, normal was this thing I desperately wanted to figure out how to do so that I could do normal with all the other people around me. I wanted that. I wanted it very badly. And it was it was strange because it was like everyone around me was playing by this invisible rule book, and everybody else around me knew all the rules, and I didn't. And so I was trying to play this game with everyone around me, and everybody else knew the rules, and I didn't know the rules to the game. And so I kept losing the game again and again and again because I didn't know how to play. And it was painful. It was actually just painful because I knew I was losing. I mean, I was incredibly aware of how badly I was doing, and I would try to talk to people about it, and they would shut me up right away. It was the same reaction. It was the, oh, look away, we don't want to look at it. I've been really, really, like, not ironically, but I've been really kind of amused by all the articles saying, oh, don't even waste your time watching it. It's like, really, you don't want me to look at it either. You're looking away. You're doing the thing. Don't you see? You're doing the thing where you see something diseased and broken and ill, and you look away. Like, I don't think people even realize they do it. When I was young, and I would talk to people, and I would say, I would talk about the problems I was having. I would be like, I'm not normal, and I want to be normal. I'm not living a normal life, and I want to have a normal life. That's all I want. I desperately want a normal life. People would shut me up. Oh, honey, you don't want to be normal. Normal is a setting on a dryer. You only say that if you have access to normal. If you don't have access to normal, you realize how absolutely stupid that statement is. I remember when I was trying to explain, there was this one lady, she was a church chaperone for the youth group. And I was trying to explain to her that when I was young, I wasn't a human being, because I wasn't. I was an animal. That's the only way that I was able to conceptualize my world. The things that are happening to me, as a child, I thought this. The things that are happening to me because I am not human. Because if I was human, no one would allow these things to happen to me. So I must not be human. I must be an animal. Because no other way would this make sense. And so I was explaining it to this woman. I was telling her, when I was younger, I was an animal, and my goal now is to discover my sense of humanity and find my human, my ability to be human, my ability to perceive myself as human, with human dignity and human rights and humanity, just that. And I was trying to explain this, and the moment I got to when I was younger, I was an animal, she shut me up right away. Oh, honey, you're not an animal. It's like, nobody wants to see, nobody wants to look. No one wants to look at the ugly thing. And we glamorize mental illness. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we're not glamorizing it. Maybe it just seems that way to me because I keep seeing it, I see people on forums who are like, oh, I have anxiety. Before anxiety, like I was talking with somebody about it. It was like, you remember when PTSD first came out? I was much younger. Oh, that's a scary thought. I'm going to be saying that more and more as time passes. But I was younger, and PTSD came out, and it was like, first it was something you hear about in the news. I think it existed for a while before it started showing up in the news. But it was like, oh, soldiers coming back from Iraq, from Afghanistan, they have PTSD, and it causes these problems, and you'd hear about it then, and then all of a sudden, you start noticing other people having PTSD, like, people where it just doesn't seem to fit all that much. Like, I had a friend who had an abusive boyfriend, and she had PTSD, and it's like, I mean, I understand that there are abusive boyfriends who, like, lock you in their basement with a bucket to pee in, and you think you're gonna die, and you're down there for a week until finally you somehow magically manage to escape. Like, and when I say magically, I don't mean like magic. I mean like, oh my God, they accidentally left the door open one day. Holy crap, run for your life. You have those situations, and it's like, yeah, they thought they were gonna die. They genuinely thought they were gonna die. They were beaten, they were abused, and they made it out alive. And oh, thank God they made it out alive. And now they're having some issues, which is understandable. But then there are people where it's like, there's so many people running around saying they had PTSD, like especially back then, like there were just so many people who had PTSD, and it was like I'd meet these folks who had been through things that I do not have a right to judge because I don't know their lives well enough. I only know the little sliver of their life that they shared with me, which isn't enough to make any kind of real judgment. But it did seem to me that there were an awful lot of people running around with PTSD who didn't seem like they should have PTSD. Like, I understand that different people handle trauma in different ways, and some people are really, really tough, and some people, like, you can hit them once and that just sets them off. And I understand there are genetic factors that are at play here as well, and so some people just are more predisposed to it, and it'll hit them much more easily with much less stimulus. So like a car accident, you're set. That's it. It happened. I understand it works that way, but it just seemed to me after a while, like after meeting all these people who were like, oh, my PTSD, oh, my anxiety, oh, my depression, oh, my, it's like I saw a lot of attention-seeking behavior and a lot of diagnoses getting thrown around very casually, and it's like there are people out there in the world who have seen some truly horrific stuff, and they needed a word for I've seen truly horrific stuff and now I'm trying to piece myself back together, and so they chose PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. They had a word for it. Great, good, we have a word for it, we have a diagnosis, we can start treating these people, we can start helping these people, we have a word for this list of problems. But then everybody had it. So really, how does it help? If 90% of the population has this problem, is it really a problem, or is it just life? Do you have a severe case of life at the moment? And that was kind of the feeling I got for a long time with PTSD. And I looked at my own situation, and it was like, okay, well, I nearly died at least once, possibly more than once. I had some not so good things happen to me. I was pretty screwed up for a good long while there. There were a few years there where I was real screwed up. Did I have PTSD? I had to look it up, and so I was looking at the symptoms for PTSD. I was reading the DSM like it was a novel, like just I know something's wrong. I know that I'm messed up. I know it. What am I messed up with so that I can start trying to fix it? So that was an interesting read, and I didn't get through the whole novel, just so you know. I mean, I was reading anything that seemed relevant to me. There were a lot of things that didn't. So I didn't spend much time on those things. I was really just trying to figure out what was wrong with me because I was screwed up, because I was undeniably screwed up when I was younger. I was unquestionably, undeniably pretty messed up. And that's another thing with mental illness. Like, people think that you're like going out and causing trouble when you're really messed up, and really a lot of people with mental illness are just really uncomfortable to be around, and you don't want to look at them, and you don't really want to face them, and you want to pretend they don't exist, and so most people just ignore them. And that was me. I went through my life and people kind of ignored me, and they didn't like me, and they didn't want to be around me. And I was really screwed up. And there was no one really to help me, and nobody really wanted to be around me because I wasn't pretty. I was diseased. I was broken. You will instinctively want to look away. And I saw that a lot. And so I'm not making it up when I say, when it's the real deal, you're probably not going to want to look at it. It's not like in the movies where, oh, they're such a brave, courageous, handsome person. They've got a little bit of PTSD, but they're such a strong and enviable character that you can get past that. Or they're a moody, brooding character with a little bit of depression, but they're such an attractive and enigmatic figure that you can get over the depression. It's like, it's ugly. It's just ugly. When it rears its little head, it's ugly. when that part of your life, no matter how pretty or how glamorous you might be in all the rest of your life, when that part shows up, it's always ugly. There's a reason it's called an illness. And you will want to look away. But, yeah. I finally figured out what was wrong with me a couple years back. I finally found something. It wasn't in the DSM, and it was one of those things, like, I found out what it was called. I guess they call it complex PTSD. I read about it. I read as much as I could about it, and most of what I read, like when you read articles on the internet, pretty quickly you start finding articles that just repeat themselves, like word for word, or they'll change like an and or a the, or they'll switch the words around, but it's the same information again and again and again. And at that point, you kind of hit rock bottom. It's like, well, I can't scrape up any more information out of the internet today, so I'm just going to have to wait until more stuff kind of floats to the surface. I'm sure I could have read some scientific studies on it, but I don't know how much information I would have really gotten out of it. Plus, let's face it, I mean, I have a high school diploma. How much would I have gotten out of reading a scientific study? Mental illness? Probably not that much. I don't have the best of education. But this complex PTSD thing, I read about it a bit, and it was interesting because it fit the bill. It described my situation. It described my experiences. It described, I don't know how well necessarily it described my reaction to what happened. And I had to stop kind of and look back at what had happened to me and how I had changed over the years. Because by the time I found this information, I had gotten out of the situation, which was high school. So I had gotten out of the public school system, age of 18. I was really screwed up. I spent the next 3 or 4 years doing, well, the next 3 years, we'll say the next 3 years of my life, doing some really heavy sculpting on my overall, just everything needed to go, everything needed to change. At about the age of 21, I started finally kind of hitting a stride where like things weren't always horrible, and I was starting to get a little bit more control of my life, and I was starting to be a little bit more graceful and a little bit less painfully awkward. And 22 came around and I started making friends, which I had not been able to really do before that point. And so then I had friends, and then I started interacting with people socially more as friends, because up until that point, like, one of the things that I did to fix myself is I went to the strip club and I talked to people like all night long. I forced myself to talk to people even though it was painful, even though it was awkward. I forced myself to interact with other people so I could learn how to do the normal thing, the normal game. I could learn how to play it. And it helped that I was in my underwear, and men will ignore a whole lot of faults just to look at your boobs. Like they will ignore so much, so many flaws. And so it put me at an advantage, and it allowed me to play the game again and again and again. And I lost again and again and again until eventually I started not losing so much. And that took about a year. I had to wait till I was 21 to get into the bar. 22, 1 year later, I started making friends. I moved out of the shitty titty bar to a nice, well, actually it was a genuinely very nice establishment, to the other bar in town, the other strip club in town. And I started making friends with the dancers there. And then I was, at that point, I was doing much, much better. And I remember there was this one night I went out to eat because I had just gotten off work, and I was always just ravenously hungry after work. Like I was so hungry. I burned a lot of calories, and I was sitting in this restaurant all by myself eating my meal, and these kids from my high school came in. And I think they might have been, given their age, they were probably just turning 21, so they were probably a little tipsy. And they came in and they were all kind of laughing and talking, and they saw me and kind of waved at me, and I saw them and I kind of waved at them, and they were like, well, come on over. And so I came over to their table and I sat with them, and I hung out with them for at least an hour, just chatting and talking and laughing and having a good time. And they got up and they left, and it was really funny because they were like, we never talked to you in high school. We should have hung out more. You're so fun, all this stuff. And they left, and I was still eating my food because I was so hungry. And I was thinking to myself, okay, I've learned how to play the game. I can play the game now well enough that people who never would have wanted to deal with me before suddenly can find me tolerable. This is good. This is good. And then, 23, so 1 year later, I met my husband, and then I had a person in my life that I actually trusted. And up until that point, there weren't really, I guess I trusted this one dancer, the girl with the golden heart. She kind of took me in. She taught me all the ropes in dancing. She was sort of a mentor to me, as far as dancing goes, because there's little details you have to learn as you go in the club, and she made that much easier for me. She taught me how to get tips. She taught me how to give tips. She taught me how to survive the industry. I trusted her, but even then there was this level where I just didn't open up to people. Like even my boyfriend, the alcoholic, like I knew that he didn't like me. And so we had this relationship, but it was always on a comfortable, superficial level. And I mean, we'd watch movies together and we cuddle and it was nice, but I knew that I could never tell him what I was thinking. I could never open up and speak to him because he didn't want to be around that part of me. He didn't want to know what I was thinking. He didn't want to know who I was. And then I met my husband, and I actually had a person in my life that I could talk to, that I could say what I was thinking, that I could just exist around, that I could finally relax in the presence of, and I didn't have to worry about him looking away. And that was huge. And by that point, I had changed so much from 18 years of age to 23, like this just massive change, like 5 years and huge life changes. I was not even remotely the same person anymore. Not even close, physically, mentally, not even close to the same person. And so looking at a diagnosis of complex PTSD, it's like, well, does that look like me now? No, it doesn't look like me at all. I'm not that person. Does it look like me when I was 18 and I was first getting out of high school and I had been through all this stuff and I had barely survived? That probably a lot. Probably a lot like me. The point being, after that long detour, I'm afraid of the day when complex PTSD finds its way into the DSM. I don't look forward to that day. I have very mixed feelings about it. On the one hand, it's really quite a relief to finally find a diagnosis that fits, because until then I was just reading through all these different things like borderline personality disorder, which definitely wasn't me, and sociopathy, which was interesting, and all these different things, all these different disorders and problems, which were interesting, but they weren't me. They weren't what I was, and I didn't know what was going on with me. I read up on PTSD because that would make sense, nearly died PTSD, that makes sense. Except that's not me. That's just not me. So it was really kind of a relief to find complex PTSD, and it was like, okay, this is a different set of symptoms. Quick note on complex PTSD. Basically, the idea is if you've been exposed to long-term, drawn-out trauma, instead of like post-traumatic stress disorder, it's usually short trauma. You're in a really bad car accident. On the ambulance, we used to call them mass casualty incidents. You're in an apartment building that burns down, and many people lose their lives, and you barely survive, and you're just traumatized because of everything you saw and the horror of it all. That's a very rapid incident. It happens over the course of like one evening, one night, one day, and it's done. Maybe you were that girl who got kidnapped by her scary boyfriend, although not anybody I know, but you get the idea. And you were in very serious trouble for like a week, and that would be very traumatizing, but it's a short thing. Complex is more, from what I've read at least, more drawn out. So months, years, I'm thinking more years than months really, of trauma. And that was my life. That was my childhood. that's many people's childhoods. And that's the thing that I kind of dread about it. I don't look forward to the day when it finds its way onto the DSM and all of a sudden people all around me are talking about their complex PTSD and how they're such victims, and oh my gosh, my life is so hard and I've been through such horrible trauma. And I mean, I get it. I get it. Life is bad. I know too many people who've been through too many horrible things. I knew people with abusive parents who beat them. I knew people with abusive parents who didn't feed them, who didn't clothe them, who didn't take care of them sufficiently. I know people who were abused in terrible, terrible ways as they were growing up, because these were my friends. These were the people I talked to. They weren't disturbed by me the way, normal, healthy, happy-go-lucky people tended to be. I met people who were rape victims, child rape victims. I met people with horrible histories. And then I've seen so many people where it's like, I get it. One of your parents had an alcohol problem. That's not good. There's so many things. It's like, it's not good. It's admittedly very not good, but I'm afraid that this particular ailment will become so ubiquitous. It's going to be like anxiety. Everybody these days, everybody has anxiety. Have you ever noticed that? Like everybody's got anxiety. If everybody has it, then it's not much of a diagnosis. It's just kind of a bad case of life. Oh, you have anxiety, so you mean you're alive, you're breathing, you have life. I'm so sorry. You've got a bad, very severe case of life. I mean, there are people out there with severe anxiety disorders. Like, I've met a few of those too. It just doesn't seem to be the same thing as all these other people who are running around going, oh, I've got anxiety. It's like, yeah, but you don't have what this person has. You're not being crippled by it. It's two different sets of things, it seems like. At least this is the way I've seen it so many times. It's like there are the people who are running around with these problems, and it's like, yeah, you got problems. Maybe you're having a bad day. Like with me, when I recently, I was having some issues where I was kind of anxious and I really didn't feel good. And I mean, I was genuinely anxious. I was having some issues. And I looked and it was like, well, I need to exercise because I haven't exercised regularly in forever, and I'm starting to get heart palpitations, and that's not so fun. Would I say I have anxiety problems? Well, I had a little bit of a problem, but I mean, it's not like I'm going around to everybody saying, oh my God, I need anti-anxiety medications and I need you all to give me a safe space and treat me like a snowflake. I needed exercise and probably healthier food. A better diet would be good. That was all I needed. I needed to, take care of myself, and exercise will help you kind of regulate those hormones and chemicals and God only knows what else. And so I looked at it and was like, okay, well, that's it. It wasn't something I needed to make a gigantic Facebook memo about to all the people that I know in all the world. I don't look forward to the day that complex PTSD becomes the thing that people need to make a giant Facebook memo about. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see people who've led very, very mild and safe lives. I don't want to see people who've had an easier time than I have running around saying, oh, my complex PTSD, I'm just so overwhelmed right now. It's like, I struggle deeply to feel sympathy for them, because I know how horrible things can be. And I only know it by brushing the surface. I haven't even seen to the dark depths of what really happened. Like, I've seen glimpses. I know what it's like when people look away from you because you're so broken and so ugly that they don't want to see you. I know what that looks like. I don't know what it's like when that's utterly inescapable. I knew that I was trapped. I knew I had to get out. I knew I had to find a way out, but I was inside of a maze, not a permanent cage. It's a difference, I had to fix myself because I was broken, but I had the capacity to fix myself, and so I did. It took me years. Some people, they can't fix themselves, and they're just trapped. and that's horrible. Please, if you feel like you're one of those people, seek out mental health professionals to help you, because, maybe one day you will be able to fix yourself. Maybe it will take you years. It took me years, but, please try to hold on to hope. But there are some people who just, they don't get out. And I see those people sometimes, and no one wants to look at them. And then I see all these other people who are like, my life is so hard and my anxiety is so bad that I have this coffee mug that talks about my anxiety, and I have this t-shirt that says I have anxiety, and I need to talk about it, and I need people to feel sorry for me, and I need attention. I need people to look at me, and I need people to pat me on the head and tell me what a wonderful person I am. I hate that. When I went to the bar, when I went to the shitty titty bar, I first turned 21 and I started going there, and I was trying to talk with people, and I didn't know how to talk to people, and all I had to tell them was what I knew, which is I nearly died and I'm trying to put myself back together again. That's all I had. That was it, And so I remember I was talking to this one guy who was like always boasting about what a badass he was. He dropped out of basic, and he was talking about what a badass he was just all the time. He was one of those guys, who's always just boasting about how, they've seen all this stuff, they've done all that stuff, and basic is really super hard, and that's why I dropped out, because it's just borderline impossible, and, you're not as tough as I am. Nobody's as tough as I am, but basic is super hard, It was like, okay, basic training is more than you can handle, but okay, you're a badass, whatever. One day I told him, yeah, I nearly died. I was in a hallway and I nearly died, and I had to fight with everything that I had to stay alive, and I barely made it. That happened. And he was like, no, it didn't. It couldn't have. It couldn't have happened. You're making it up for attention. You're making up for attention, because if that had really happened, you would have PTSD right now. And I didn't have PTSD. I've never had PTSD. I've had complex PTSD, whatever that means, but I've never had PTSD. Nearly dying in a hallway? I mean, it was a shitty day, but it was just another day. You stick a man in a room with a hungry tiger, he's going to freak out. You stick a man in a room with a hungry tiger every single day for 97 days. On day 97, he's going to walk into that room with that tiger, and he's going to be like, oh boy, here we go again. That was my life. Oh boy, here we go again. I'm dying. Oh boy, here we go again. Maybe I'll kick the bucket this time. If I do, if I die today, right now, right here in this hallway, I'm never going to have to feel this ever again. How delightful is that? Kind of hard to panic when you're thinking about how good it's going to be dead. I think we glamorize. I think we glamorize mental illness. I think we've done it for too much for too long. Please tell me if I'm wrong. Leave a comment. Tell me what you think. I'm kind of rambling today. I tend to ramble more than I'd like, but I'd really like some comments on this one. What do you guys think? What did you think about the movie, if you've seen the movie? Do you think that the movie affected, do you think that my reaction to it of, oh my God, that's too much like my own life, is that the kind of reaction that everybody has? Is everybody having that moment of discomfort, like, oh, I've had those awkward moments a little bit? Is everybody cringing away just a little bit because they can relate to it? Or are they cringing away because they're having that moment of, oh, this is a very, very badly broken person, quick look away? Is it that? Is that what made the movie uncomfortable? What made the movie uncomfortable? Did the movie, actually make you uncomfortable? Because some people have pointed out, and it's been kind of interesting that, a lot of folks in the media who don't want to look at it, they don't want to look at it because of the role that the media played in the story. Um, because mental health is, kind of on the table for discussion. Do you guys think that it's been glamorized? That mental illness has been too glamorized in Hollywood, in the media, on social media? Um, have we put a rosy tint on something that really is not pretty in real life, in reality? When you actually get a good picture of it, it's not pretty. Um, you know, what do you guys think about that? Anyway, this video is far too long. I will talk to you guys later. Have a good night.